that concludes my keynote. I hope that you found it useful. I'd now like to shift the attention onto Mayer Brown. So a little bit about Mayer Brown. So Mayer Brown has been a customer of Fliplet for, well, quite a long time. We kind of first met in 2019. And they're quite a large law firm, 27 offices globally, 37,000 staff. They've launched 6 apps with Fliplet to date. And we're used by a range of different geographies and different departments in those geographies. And your speaker today is Adam. He's the Senior Innovation Manager, and I will now hand over to Adam.
Thanks very much, Ian. So I'm just going to share my screen and share my slides, but thank you very much for inviting me to this summit and to talk. Just going to share now. So there we go. That should be my slides that you're now seeing. So after seeing Ian's slides, I thought, hey, I wonder what AI thinks I look like. And apparently AI thinks I'm miserable. Every single picture I got was of me crying or sad when I asked for Adam Curphey in a Pixar style. So there you go. Be aware of the dangers of using AI. But what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to be covering 3 areas in this short presentation. First, a bit about Mayer Brown and some of my background in innovation, and that'll help set the stage for what I'm going to talk about in terms of our journey with Fliplet. And then, of course, I will be talking about the topic that is now legally required to be in every presentation about technology in the world of law, which is generative AI. So I'll have a talk about some of that, building on some of what Ian has already said. So Mayer Brown and innovation. I'll start off with a quick introduction to my background. So it's a fairly unusual one in law, or at least it was when I started out. So I started as a capital markets lawyer, practiced with White and Case before I made the move to go and be a law lecturer at BPP University Law School. So to this day, I remain a professor at BPP, and the education and training angle is something I'm always considering when I'm working in my current role in innovation. Now, how that innovation role came about is that law firms I was working with started asking about new technologies, new skills that they wanted to see from people joining their firms. And so I started listening to the issues that people were encountering, and I created courses around it. And I will say, unlike most legal tech courses you'll have heard of, it didn't have blockchain in it. And now blockchain's gone, right? It's been replaced by generative AI in those same courses. But that may give you an idea of how easily I'm swayed by the latest kind of potential fads in innovation, whether or not AI is one of those. Then I went to Reed Smith to work in innovation before coming here to Mayer Brown. So in Mayer Brown, I'm a member of the Legal Innovation and Strategy team, so I report directly to our Chief Innovation Officer, Amal Bagage. Now, our team sits under the banner of Mayer Brown's Embrace Innovation program. It's a collaboration between legal innovation and strategy, the knowledge management team, the IT team, and the legal project management team. And our role is to identify and solve existing challenges in new ways, or to solve new challenges altogether, whether those are internal or external, with a kind of primary focus on supporting lawyers in servicing our clients. Now, that means using new technologies, new techniques, new services, building a culture of innovation at the firm, managing our ideas pipeline from lawyers and business services professionals. So all sorts of different things, workshops, those things with various different people. Now, this gives us a brief overview of some of the things we do. We like to use this infographic. It's a wide range of offerings. So you could be dealing with developing a new solution one day, delivering training the next, process mapping for efficiencies the day after that. It's a very varied role. So we do a huge range of stuff, which really feeds in to how Fliplet has been useful for Mayer Brown. Now, when I was chatting to Ian at the start of this, he said it would be useful if I gave some context as to what I'm involved in outside of Mayer Brown as well, because it gives an insight into my own opinion into innovation. So if that wasn't enough variety for my day-to-day and I wasn't just doing different things all the time, I also do a few things outside that help inform my approach. The first is I wrote a book called The Legal Team of the Future, Law Plus Skills, which is all about the skills that those working in the legal profession need now and in the future to thrive in a fast-changing profession. And we can only look at how quickly Gen AI came over the horizon to see how equipped we need to be to deal with these things and to deal with change. So that's talking about the kind of skill sets that we need. And I'll talk about that in a second. I also chair the Trailblazer group for the Legal Technologist Apprenticeship. So this is not an apprenticeship you can do right now, but it is being built and should be offered from next year as a new hybrid route into law. So it's based on existing digital technology professionals apprenticeships. The third thing that takes most of my spare time is I sit on the steering board of what was called the O-Shaped Lawyer, but is now just called O-Shaped. So O-Shaped is a group that was founded by GCs looking at the human skills needed by their private practice lawyers. And it's seeking to evolve the relationship between in-house teams and law firms. There's a number of surveys canvassing the GC community, looking at what they need from their law firms. And the primary thing really is contextual advice. And all of that feeds into how we've been using Fliplet. So this is the model of innovation I have in my book that I've shamelessly stolen from myself, so it's fine. It really provides you with a map for how I think about innovation, which has 4 parts. So we need to combine in our teams individuals who have skills in law plus people, law plus business, law plus change, and law plus tech. So all of that needs to come together with people thinking about all these different elements. And that really adds up to my simple ethos for handling innovation: solve the right problem. And it applies to anything we do. Einstein apparently, because this is one of those things where you say a quote and it turns out that the person you're quoting never actually said it. But apparently Einstein said if you gave him an hour to solve a problem, he would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And the technologies that we use are a solution that have to be solving the right problem. I've watched from right through my lecturer days, so many law firms, people in innovation teams who have wasted money on buying new technologies without thinking about how they're going to be used, or have been so committed to innovating via press release that they don't actually concentrate on doing stuff that's going to drive innovation and change forward. So that brings me nicely into our journey with Fliplet. And the thing that really stands out to me in the usage is versatility. Now, we all know law firms are risk-averse creatures, and bringing in new technologies can take time. They also have a lot of lawyers in them. And I can say this as I was one, but lawyers are not great at dealing with low-fidelity prototypes. You know, one of the things you read about if you ever look into service design and designing products and design thinking and all that kind of stuff is use low fidelity prototypes, because people would be more likely to comment on it. They think if you spent too long, it's too polished, they're not going to give you the honest feedback. Lawyers will absolutely give you the honest feedback straight away. It doesn't matter how high fidelity or pretty your app is or whatever it is that you're developing. Many times have I presented a demo to lawyers wanting feedback on functionality, and we've spent the whole time talking about the font and the colors, and is the bullet point in the place that I wanted it. Now, what Fliplet allows us to do easily is handle a variety of different use cases and produce something which looks good quickly. There is obviously the complexity built in if we need custom features and development, but you can provide lawyers with something that works and looks good in a short time, and at least gets you to a point where you can build on that conversation, which is really important when you've got time-sensitive matters that you're working. Going back to my emphasis on training and education as well, it's also really easy to train people in Fliplet. Now, trust me, I've dealt with a lot of vendors, I've dealt with a lot of tools, and we have all heard that, oh yeah, you can learn to use it in 2 hours type thing. And then you actually get to grips with the tool and it turns out you need an entire weekend of your life and possibly 3 follow-up textbooks and all that sort of stuff. This is genuinely easy to train people in. There is an app I'm going to talk about in a moment that I started doing and kind of taught myself a little bit. Obviously, we got some training and support from Fliplet, but just kind of trained myself. And then another member of my team based in Asia, Jonathan, came in and took over the app and again, trained himself up. And we did it really quickly as far as this worked. So actually getting to grips with this stuff was really easy. But what have we built? Well, it all started with this. This is the app I was talking about. It's a UNHCR app for refugees looking to navigate the Hong Kong school system. For us, it was a perfect example of being able to start small because it was a pro bono matter. There was already this large Word document that was full of guidance. And we worked with the legal team to condense it and present it in a user-friendly format. Being able to access it on the mobile made it much easier for refugees who would likely be on the move. And one key thing to note here is, yes, it looks good, and they were really happy with it, and it came out. And we've now handed it over to the UNHCR, and they're continuing to use it. So it's a really good resource. But just as important as developing the app was thinking about the content. How are we going to do it? Where could we be more visual than that 20-page Word document? How would we split it up? So Ian talked about some of the potentials about using AI might be in helping generate content. I think also summarizing content. We're not good. If you've ever seen a PowerPoint selection of slides from lawyers, it's full of sentences, right? We like words, but if we can summarize it, when you're thinking about these apps, you need to think about the content in a different way. So that would be one piece of advice from me is you can't just lift and drop. You do have to think about how you are going to structure the data that you want to share. So you shouldn't just lift and drop. It takes careful consideration. Now, we're obviously doing loads of client-facing stuff that I can't show you, so it's blurred. But the real growth area for us in terms of what we see as far as ideas that come in are self-service client tools like trackers. I've mentioned already that one of the issues I kept coming across with my role in the O-Shape group is that clients want their legal advice in the context of their business. They're not just asking the law firm out of academic interest, right? And ideally, they would not like a 200-page Word document when what they have to present to their CEO is 2 slides. It's all about context and delivery and listening. We had an O-Shaped in-person meeting recently, and one of the GCs at the meeting was talking about that they'd asked a firm for a 1-pager, and what they got was 4 pages. And then they went back and said, no, I wanted a 1-pager. And what they got was 1.5 pages. So just that ability to listen and reframe. So one thing that we can do with Fliplet is take legal knowledge and make it accessible. Slice it, review it, search it, those sorts of things. Now, we did this for a client where we took a legal update that ran to sometimes 20 pages and turned it into more real-time information that they can access that can be cut in the way that they want it so that the client can find it in their own time, look at the bits that matter to them. And the same applies across the board. We've done a number of different trackers, 50-state surveys type stuff. But you can take information and place it in Fliplet in a way that clients can access what they need and when. And what's been really useful from our perspective is, and I know Ian has talked before about using Fliplet input data. One of the struggles that we sometimes have with getting lawyers on board is teaching them new technologies. And that is one of the things. Whenever you think of a new tool like a tracker, you're sitting there, or you are, if you're in an innovation team and you've been doing this for a while, you're sitting there going, how's it going to get maintained? We're all very excited about the first version. Oh, yeah, it's going to go. How does it get maintained is the big question. And what we've been able to really quite easily do is integrate SharePoint lists with the data sets in Fliplet. Now, what that means is that the lawyers just have to go to a list in SharePoint. They recognize what it looks like. It looks like a table. So they can update there. And then what that will do is push an update to the app that changes the content for the user. The really good thing is that remembering how much lawyers like pretty things and how they like knowing where their bullets are and where the bold is and the underline, is that whatever format that's in the SharePoint list is taken through into Fliplet automatically. So your bullets are where you put them, your footnotes are where you put them, your underline, your full stops, your bold, your colors, everything is where you put it. And that's been really useful for us for engaging lawyers, because you don't have to say, hey, here's a new login and here's a new piece of technology. And it may well be that you find some that want to do that and you have those citizen developer moments. But sometimes a partner just wants to say, look, here's the download of all the information, put it into something that looks nice. And that's where we found real success. Of course, we're also using Fliplet across the firm outside of the innovation team. So it was our IT team that brought in Fliplet, and we use it for a whole range of use cases that revolve around communication type stuff. So when we want to get messages out to people or to create smaller communities outside of the intranet, efficiency gains, so allowing people to have their own little self-service automated processes for doing things like, I don't know, delivering stationery or whatever it may be. Data collection services, which I've already talked about, were just quick process improvement tools. But the advantage of being able to use Fliplet's web app feature is that we can put it on a computer or a mobile. And if people just visit the site, it'll look like a web page, and they won't know it's an app if you don't want them to. So the real key thing for me in a team that is constantly asked to do very different things, that is constantly asked to very quickly come up with solutions for a variety of use cases across all practice groups and all jurisdictions, Fliplet is one of those things in the toolkit where you can say, I know that that's going to be able to be turned to a number of different use cases very quickly. And likewise, when you're doing idea generation with people, lawyers can often find it difficult to look at a blank piece of paper and imagine what they want to do. What we can do with kind of building sessions, and we're exploring hackathons and those sorts of things with Fliplet, is that they can get to grips with the tool. We know it doesn't take long to train them, and then they can see some of what's possible and work their way through it. So that's where we found, it to be very useful for us. So where does AI fit in? I feel like I have to talk about this because it is the hot topic at the moment. It is the terrible joke, elephant AI, never mind. It's the elephant in the room. Everyone wants it, or they're shouting about how they have it, or whose job's going to be gone because it exists. And I fully agree. It is hugely powerful, or it will be even more powerful. And I can see a range of solutions around generative AI. And when I say that, just as Ian was saying, I don't just mean the large language models like ChatGPT, Harvey, others you've read about in legal, but the image generators like Midjourney and DALL-E 2. So there are lots of legal use cases. It's around the typical stuff that you've probably seen, which is we do most of our work working with documents. So it's search, analysis, summarization. I find it really useful in replacing lorem ipsum type placeholder text, because it can give you some sensible sounding text if you're creating a prototype or you just want to test out a new technology. You can ask it to just develop some dummy data for you to put in there, which is quite good. And I think also what'll be exciting is when we can combine the image generation tools with the language generation tools and create slides and summarize chunks of pages of legal documentation and turn it into a single image or a few slides, which is the way in which our clients want it. So while we as a firm, we're exploring Gen AI and the offerings, but we're also experimenting with tools that go beyond the kind of boxed out Gen AI. So for example, looking at tools that can use AI to go beyond a simple red line compare and instead look at the comparison of meaning and semantics and intention behind the drafting. So not just all the same words in the same places. Is it likely that the same intention was intended by each version of it, which is really cool. But I will echo what Ian said before, is that AI sounds really good. Like when it's written down, you're like, hey, this sounds great. I have asked it about me on a number of occasions, and that sounds really like I'm just searching for myself all the time. I was testing it. I've asked it about me, but every time it gives me a range of accolades, from a doctorate, which I don't have, authoring a book that I definitely didn't, having degrees from 5 different universities, but it all sounds really convincing when you read it. Now, one of the things that I do quite like, and this is to go back to our Fliplet uses, is Ian has said, you can integrate AI into Fliplet in a variety of ways. You can host AI tools in there. But one thing that Fliplet really helps you do is start small. I'm a great fan of solving the problem in front of me and then building on that success to roll out, right? Solve the problem that you're given. And that is where I found this to be really useful, is that you can just start small. You can experiment very quickly, get stuff up and running much more easily than I found in other tools. And that takes me all the way back to solving the right problem. And I think that is what my biggest piece of advice would be, whether you are developing an app, whether you are looking at how you can use AI, whether you are looking at the huge range of templates and different use cases that you'll hear about on the rest of this summit, make sure you're solving the right problem, that you're not running around going, oh, I've got this generative AI, I'm going to use it on you and you and you and you. Are they problems that you need solved? That's the real question. And I think one of the things that Fliplet can help you do is very quickly get there and show, is this a solution that works for the problem that you've got in front of you? So I had 20 minutes. I've taken 21, so I've gone slightly over, but I think that leaves us time for questions.
Yes, that definitely leaves us time for questions. And thank you for bringing some exciting ideas to the table, Adam. And also, I like the elephant AI kind of in the room kind of pun that you've got going there. I think that's quite good. I'm not sure if it would have been everybody's taste, but I enjoyed it.
Was that taste spelled TAIST? Sorry, no.
Everything has to be spelled that way now. And I'm pretty sure if it's you putting your name into AI, like it's okay from privacy law. I think it's. So I think you're in a safe zone there of testing it on yourself.
Yeah, no, I've not been doing that with the firm testing tools. This is a generic ChatGPT testing.
Yeah, exactly. So
it now knows who I am. Yeah.
So I guess let's kind of just double check. So you said you wrote a book, and I think you spoke a little bit about the book. But if people want to find out more information about the book and kind of the innovation. I don't know if I'm using the right terms, techniques or kind of
methodologies. There's a whole model. It kind of brings together some of the models that you'll have heard about. So the T-shaped, O-shaped, the Delta competency model in the US, and into one kind of Law Plus model. It's for sale on Amazon. You can get it. I think it's like 22 quid at the moment. I tried to price it so that students can afford it as well. So it's called The Legal Team of the Future. So if you just search for that, you should be able to find it on Amazon.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'm sure my colleague can include a link if people want to go and learn more about that when we kind of promote your session. And actually, I just realized that was lovely, because this gives me a lovely way to tie in your kind of final point around like solve the right problem. So how do you solve the right problem? I know you spoke about how Fliplet can do it, but at a more macro level, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong in assuming that Fliplet's the solution to all the problems. So how do you ensure that the right problem is actually understood before you start building high fidelity prototypes?
Sure. Is this a Fliplet Summit or not? It's the solution to everything. No. So what we've found and what I tend to use is initial exploration and listening sessions. So quite often that will be asking people, what you can go very general and you can say, what are the things you really enjoy with your day? What are the things you don't? Or if you've got a specific focus problem, we've run a series of design sprints around our various offices around the world, trying to identify what the challenges are that our lawyers and business services encounter and what kind of solutions they would produce. So we had we do some workshops around surface design, about ideation that you talked about. How can we be coming up with ideas? How do you identify the right problem? So from building out personas, from looking at how do you understand the problem for every facet? Why do the people want what they're asking for? What's the real problem that you're trying to get to the bottom of? Usually mapping out processes is often a real help. When people say, oh, I'm so annoyed with this. And you say, okay, well, what do you do? And quite often when we've done that, we've found out either somebody far more senior than they should be is involved in the process doing something very junior, or there are like 3 more steps than there need to be, like somebody
Mm.
asking somebody else if they can get into a piece of technology, whereas if they could get into it themselves, you negate an entire step and a bottleneck. So
Mhm.
we use kind of a whole range of techniques. Some of those we've done with clients now as well in those terms of those design sprints. Really, it is just drawing on those service design techniques. I think we're one of those things in law where we like to think we're very special and different, and we can't bring any learning from other professions because we're special and different, and we're lawyers, and that's, it's not project management, it's legal project management, it's not
Mm.
design, it's legal design. But there is a lot that can be learned from generic service design, particularly around ideation and the techniques that you can use. And obviously at Mayer Brown, we have incentivization in terms of matter codes that people can have to engage with our innovation projects as well.
Okay. So you're carving out like an allowance there. It's not that they have to feel like I'm stealing time from other tasks if I want to engage in things that I think could help in a broader sense.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. You said that Fliplet was really easy to use. When you have a colleague that you're going to suggest Fliplet to, what guidance do you give them so that they are, hopefully going to experience what you've experienced, or is that you just like, here's an account, you'll figure it out?
No, we do give guidance. We have an intranet page online that talks about some of the various tools that we use. But we have to make sure that everybody's trained as well from a risk perspective, just to make sure that they know what they're doing and where it goes. So we do conduct initial training in Fliplet to make sure that people are on board. But as I say, often when you've got the lawyers involved, we're actually not putting them into Fliplet. It's more for us to understand the requirements of what they're trying to solve and picking the right tool, of
Mm.
which Fliplet may be one and can be in a lot of situations, but which may be another
Yeah.
tool, or maybe no software at all, that really solves that problem. Because what I don't want people to do is get really hung up on the technology that we use. And again, because you have people coming to you and we'll have all had this being like, oh, I saw technology X, it's amazing, I want it. You're like, well, we've got technology Y that does exactly what technology X does. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And it keeps coming back to that for us. So yeah, it's kind of package of training, and it's also that support of having people available. So quite often I will showcase with people what we've done so far. So we've had a series of demos, and we've got a global team. I think some of our team are on this summit, but we've got a team based out in Washington, team based out in Asia, who are really assisting with the tools that we create and have actually taken them into new places that I couldn't even imagine. And that's been quite useful because it means we can cover off the lawyers when we sit down with them and show them what we've done over time. And actually, once it looks good, lawyers have been quite receptive to the iterative fashion of creating new solutions, that we don't have all the functionality yet, but does this do it right? Does this do it right with little changes? But provided it looks good the whole way through, I found that they're actually okay with that.
Okay. We've got a question about SharePoint. Were you involved in the SharePoint integration?
So with some of our team, I did write the initial API, which I'd never done before.
Oh, wow.
I'd never written an API, and I didn't really, know what I was doing, but it was really easy to do. So yes, we have a push API into Fliplet.
Okay, and so you built it yourself based off of kind of how you, okay.
Yep, using Power Automate. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because yeah, we actually, that's exactly what the question was that we received, which is, did you use kind of the connector from Fliplet with Power Automate to do it? But it sounds like you did that before we had the connector.
Yeah, we did it before we had the connector. So we needed something that was just going to push the information. So we used Power Automate.
Cool. And just to kind of follow on question about SharePoint, you kind of mentioned that one of the things that the lawyers really like is that it retains the formatting. Have you had to kind of provide any guidelines or training to ensure that kind of the formatting doesn't, say, clash with the app that it's ending up in and make it look like a mess?
Yeah, and then what kind of happens is that they then ask a partner or somebody else for it, and they give it back in house style that isn't the style of the app. So there is a little bit of cleaning that takes place sometimes. We end up with something in completely the wrong font, or for whatever reason, the way the formatting's been done. People hate using the proper formatting. They like pressing space, 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 space instead of indenting and those sorts of things. So we generally have a kind of look at the content when it comes in and just make sure that it works. And we usually say if it's anything outside of just updating words, like specific words, if you are adding a huge chunk of content, get one of us involved when you're doing that, because we have found, sometimes you end up with, it's like, I used to be a lecturer, right? And people would copy and paste answers from practical law, and it would be in completely different font and format, and they wouldn't change it. They just leave it. And it can end up a bit like that. So we do have to make sure that we keep a bit of QA kind of viewing over it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. That was
thank you.
Truly fascinating, and I enjoyed your jokes. I will... I'll definitely be looking up that book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
We are going to move on to the next session of the summit, pretty much bang on time. So far, this summit's going very well. And thank you very much for the person who asked the question about SharePoint integration. So next up, we have the roadmap update, followed by demos and our InfoSec update.